The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome back to Living United with Nashua Business. My name is Mike Affelberg, and today we have two special guests from Enterprise Bank. We're going to be interviewing Peter Rayno. Peter is Director of Banking for New Hampshire, and Jay Dinkel, who is the Senior Commercial Lending Officer with Enterprise Bank. So, gentlemen, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Nice to have you today.
It's great to be here, Mike. Thank you.
Great having you. So Enterprise Bank, the reason why I wanted to talk with you guys is because Enterprise Bank is one of the most active banks in our community and in the communities you serve in terms of philanthropic giving back. And I know that from personal experience from the bank and also the individuals who work at the bank, it seems to be really a strong part of the culture and a strong part of how you approach business. So it's really great to have you both on the show to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you.
So, and I should say, in truth in advertising, I'm big on transparency here, that for our audience, Jay is also on our board at United Way. So thank you for that and for your years of service. We appreciate your presence on our board of directors, but not that anybody's misled and wonders what's going on here.
I'd say nice things about you anyway.
Yeah, highly unlikely, but thank you for that. So I want to start with a little bit of personal stuff. So maybe, gentlemen, if you could tell me just a little bit of your personal backgrounds. I know, Peter, you have a background from Salem. I don't know if you're born and raised there or.
Yeah, I actually was born in Methuen. My dad was a police officer in Methuen for 35 years, and my roots were there. But for the last, about 20 years ago, moved to New Hampshire in Salem, and that's where I lived until just 3 years ago when my wife and I decided to move out to the seacoast. But my office is still in Salem. However, I spend a lot of time in Nashua and in all the locations where Enterprise Bank has a location. I don't like to sit behind my desk, so I spend a lot of time in my car and an awful lot of time here in Nashua.
I'm sure. Sure, that's true. And I know that we'll get to this later when we talk about your philanthropic endeavors and what you guys do in your communities, but I know you've also done a tremendous amount of work in Salem.
Well, yeah, and throughout the state as well. My passion has been supporting our civic and charitable organizations, and most of my background was in Salem, so as a result I spent a long time on the board of directors of the Boys and Girls Club in Salem, Chamber of Commerce in Salem, Rotary Club. But over and above that, have gotten involved in a lot of other nonprofits. Very honored to be a member of the board of New Hampshire Public Television, which is just a great organization as well. And that really is, I guess, the mantra of Enterprise Bank. Yeah. And so many of our folks, like Jay and others we work with in Nashua especially, are so involved in the nonprofits out here.
So I found in some of the deep, dark research that I was doing, I always like to do a lot of deep background here,
yes.
sort of like
Not
New
too
York
deep.
Times-ish. Right? Yes, so I happened to actually come across that you studied political science. I studied political science. I think that's, so maybe that means if you're going to study political science, you're going to end up as a banker or running a nonprofit. I don't know.
Well, I graduated from Assumption College, and I was a political science major. My goal was to go into either public management, town management, city management. But my whole time going to college, I spent every summer and Christmas break as a teller. Yeah. And so when I got out of college, I had a hard time raising the money for my MPA, Master's in Public Administration, and my bank, which was the former Bank of New England, said, just come back and work at the bank as a management trainee for a year, save some money, and then you can go on and do that studying. And that was 35 years ago, and I never left the industry. So.
Good, I'm glad that's worked out for you so well.
Sure has.
And then you went on to get a master's in business administration.
Yeah, I hold an MBA from UMass Lowell, and I have two kids. They're both at UNH undergrads, a junior and a freshman. Actually, once we stop taping here, I'm going to move my son out of his dorm tonight. But that's my educational background.
Yeah, so very similar. I also found out that my political science degree wasn't going to lead me to being governor of California, as I had hoped, but instead went into business and ended up with an MBA as well.
California's lost, Mike.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe. Depends on who you ask. Anyway, and yourself, Jay, are you New Hampshire native?
I am. I grew up in Keene,
Okay.
in the western part of the state. I grew up in a family business. My folks owned a motel and restaurant in Keene.
Yeah.
And for most of my childhood years, I was part of the team of dishwasher and busboy and desk clerk and all the other things that go into running a business like that.
Yeah. That's probably served you well as a commercial lender, I'd imagine, because you have some.
I like
some
to
deep-
think so.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
imagine you have some empathy for what a small business person goes through.
That, and yes, being on the other side of the desk, so to speak, I think is always good to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I also have a bias, I think, toward people and trying to hire people who come from family businesses because typically they recognize just how much has to go into making ends meet, and every day is a new challenge.
Yeah.
So it, I think, causes people to have that certain seriousness about business that
Yeah.
I appreciate.
So my sense is that you probably were one of these boomerang people who decided that you just loved Keene so much in the winter that you're going to go study in North Carolina.
Exactly.
Is that what
I
happened?
was going to get out of New Hampshire, and I hope this is a good study for the next generation because, I left. I went in North Carolina. My wife and I were married shortly after that. We met in North Carolina, lived in Texas for a few years, and then realized what a great place New Hampshire
Where did you live
was.
in Texas?
Lived in Austin,
That's so
which,
funny.
when you're in your 20s and
Yeah.
newly married was a tremendous place, but it was also probably not the place we wanted to drop roots and raise a family. And when that time dawned on us, although my wife didn't know New Hampshire very well,
Yeah.
she now does, and we moved back here at that time.
Yeah, similar with us. We were in Texas for a couple of years as well.
Ah.
And ended up coming back. I mean, there's just nothing compares to what we have here in northern New England.
I agree.
In so many different ways.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Guess you have to leave it to appreciate it.
yeah, that's probably true. There's something to be said for that. I agree. But hopefully, too many people don't leave it and forget about it.
And that's why I said I hope it's a study
Yeah.
because we are clearly in need of younger people either staying in the state or returning to it like we did.
Yeah.
I hope that's a trend that just continues.
Well, I
on the
do
road.
too. I do too. And the business climate plays a big role in that. Obviously, where there are jobs and opportunities, there's going to be growth and young people coming in. And that's where I'd really like to shift to talking about Enterprise Bank a little bit. You, I know, started in Lowell. I was at your office headquarters, I think your original office for a lunch a couple of months ago, and quite a story of growth and promoting the local community. I'd like to maybe share with our audience a little bit about sort of the roots of Enterprise Bank and how we've gotten from there to where we are today.
It's a great story, Mike. The bank was founded in 1982 by George Duncan, and George remains our chairman of the board. His office is right next to the teller line still in the first floor of our main office. And George was president of a bank in Lowell called First Bank. And at that time, back just prior to '89, they had been bought out by, and First Bank was a great community bank based in Lowell. They had gotten bought out by a large bank. And George and a lot of the business leaders in the community realized that when community banks get sold, that it creates great disruption to the business community, to the nonprofit community, to families, to employees. And so George and a lot of other folks in the middle of a recession pooled their money and started Enterprise Bank, really with a goal of serving small to mid-sized businesses, families, and giving back to the community. And a lot of other banks started at that same time and didn't survive, but Enterprise has and really has thrived to the point where through organic growth, not through acquisitions, but through identifying communities in Massachusetts and then starting 11 years ago in New Hampshire, by opening branches in communities that really
Yep.
lacked a community bank presence, where you have experienced bankers there to personally assist you, but also get involved and give back to the community. And now, as we look back in 2016, we'll soon, next month, be opening our 23rd branch. It'll be in Nashua on Amherst Street. That'll be our 6th New Hampshire office. And we recently announced our 7th New Hampshire office will open in Wyndham early next year. The bank now has about $2.3 billion in assets, almost 500 employees, legal lending limit of $40 million to any one client. And that all started from just some folks who saw a need for a community bank. And the best part is that the bank adheres to those values of service and support for our communities. And I joined Enterprise 11 years ago. I had been with one of those large banks, and it's enjoyable not only to bank here, it's even more enjoyable to work here. And it's been very supportive, and we're very proud of where we've come.
That's really a great story. I know also part of your story is the immigrant story, and that you've really, I know in Lowell, started out with where there's a very heavy Southeast Asian population. But that's been really part of the story. And
I'm glad you mentioned that. Lowell has one of the largest Cambodian populations in the United States, and that's been very important to our growth. Many of our employees are of Cambodian descent. Believe it or not, our ATMs in Lowell even can be read with the language of Cambodian people, and it's been very important to give back to that community. Lowell is an immigrant city, and it's been a part of our growth. And since then, we've moved into Lawrence, which is also an immigrant city, and very involved in the Spanish community there. That's important to George Duncan, and it's important to all of us in senior management, to everyone at the bank.
yeah, I know that he was saying, telling one of the stories about one of his assistants being actually a refugee who came from Southeast Asia and had to flee the Khmer Rouge,
Yes.
more or less under fire.
Yeah, she and her husband, and they actually did a documentary about it, and that's a source of pride for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we're lucky to have in our community as an organization, an institution like yours that cares in that way. So thank you. So now we have, you said 8 in New Hampshire?
Six.
Six, okay.
Yeah, 6, and then 7. The 7th will be opening in Nashua.
Oh, okay.
Next month.
Okay, so the 7th is Amherst Street and the 8th is Windham.
I think that. It's either
Yeah.
7th and 8th or 6th and 7th. We've been adding about one a year, so.
Well, and half of them are in the greater Nashua area. So we're lucky for that. That's great.
Well, the Nashua community has been really welcoming to us, and that's because of our people. You have somebody like Jay Dinkel and other folks in our community like Lori Piper, and you mentioned Deb Novotny earlier, and John Phelan, and these are folks who are involved in so many nonprofits, and I think their involvement in the community has led to the welcome we've received.
Well, three of them who you just mentioned are involved with our local United Way. Lori Piper is involved with our marketing committee, and Jay is involved with our board of directors, and Deb Novotny has been involved over the years in our community investment committee. So which are all really fantastic activities. So, and many, many, many other things.
They are.
Non-United Way. So it's really impressive. So Jay, I was hoping maybe we could talk a little bit about the future. What is the future of Enterprise Bank?
Well, that's a great question because I'm the
You're the future.
newest recruit.
That's why I saved the
I'd like
question
to think
for
I'm
you.
part of the future, although there's great momentum, and as Peter said, great folks on the team already. So
And no offense, Peter, we're not implying that you're the past and Jay's the future.
Oh, I think we're pretty. We're almost the past.
I'll get
but,
my cane out. And,
no, we got a ways to go.
I clearly, as the newest person, feel that I can add to this team, but it's already got great things in place, great people, and a great sense of teamwork and community that you don't find in many businesses, regardless banking or not. It's a very unique culture that started right at the beginning with Mr. Duncan and the other founders, and has continued, and it goes all the way through the organization now. So that's why I joined just a month and a half ago.
So who would be your target customers? Who are the prime candidates for somebody for Enterprise Bank?
Typically a small or medium-sized business, professional, their employees, their associates and professionals that work with them. We're not exclusive in that regard, but I think we have services and an attention to their needs that makes them the most beneficial.
Small businesses, you probably help out with, cash flow and those types of products.
Lending, cash management. Yep. We have insurance division. We have a wealth management, investment side. So we really can provide a kind of one-stop shopping for businesses of that type, business owners. They have limited time, like so many people, that we try to make it as simple as possible so they can deal with us and we can run with it from there.
And aside from small businesses, we've also had great success in banking nonprofit organizations, institutions of higher learning, municipalities. So the expertise that we've developed in small business, we've been able to extend that and that level of service to nonprofits throughout southern New Hampshire, as well as several municipalities that we provide finance services to, and educational facilities as well.
So pretty much all kinds of institutional banking, whether it be business, nonprofit, educational, small to medium size ideally, and that at large as well, I presume.
We can grow with them. It's funny, and Jay and I run into this all the time. When people think of Enterprise, they think of us as being a tiny community bank with limited bandwidth and limited ability to help. But again, when we talk about the size of the bank that people don't understand and the bank's large legal lending limit and technological capabilities, it opens some eyes, I think.
Sure does.
Well, I have a friend who I referred to Deb about, I'd say maybe 2 years ago, 1.5 to 2 years ago, and he was struggling to get a line of credit with his then current institution, and he asked if I knew of anybody, and I said, well, Deb and I were in BNI together.
Oh.
And so I said, well, I want to call my friend, Deb Novotny, and she's over at Enterprise Bank, and she might be able to help you out. I know that they do a lot of that, and he was just shocked at how responsive and really just appreciative of how well she was able to help him get up and running. And so I took away from that it's a very responsive bank, sort of big bank resources, small bank feel, maybe.
I think that's a good description. But in addition, Mike, I mean, one of the things about bringing in experienced folks like ourselves, and you mentioned Debbie and Lori and John, is that we know how to help some of these small businesses through our level of experience. Just our access to resources with the SBA, the State of New Hampshire Business Finance Authority, the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. A lot of folks who come in looking for conventional financing, we can help them, but a lot of times really help them through augmenting those financing resources with these other organizations. The Regional Economic Development Center, these are all state and local agencies designed to help small businesses. Well, our level of experience, we know how to use them.
Right.
And so when you combine the bank's resources with those, we're able to assist those folks.
That's great. That's great. It's a terrific story. Very, very impressive. So I want to shift it in a little bit to talking about sort of the nonprofit and the philanthropic part of the world. One of the stories I wanted our readers to know about is a couple of weeks ago I was at a very amazing event down in Lowell at the auditorium, the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. And I think that's where you've held this event for years now.
Celebration of Excellence.
Celebration of Excellence. And it was so impressive to see so many nonprofit organizations from your entire footprint brought in to be recognized for the work that they do, and really just kind of a stunning visual of how you appreciate and participate in these nonprofit businesses' lives. You may want to talk a little bit about that, how that's come together.
Well, that was the first one I had attended, as you might imagine, and although I'd heard of it, and it is even beyond a celebration. It's a community extravaganza is the best way to put it, where certain leaders in both philanthropic and business pursuits are recognized. They're not necessarily all Enterprise Bank customers at this time, but the the breadth of the nominations and the independent committee that helps decide them ensures that it's really picking some people who have had extraordinary success. On top of that, it's attended by 2,000 business and community leaders throughout our whole region, and lots of food and drink and celebration.
I'm going back just for that. The food
that
and
was
drink
pretty good.
were pretty good, absolutely.
How is it? Because by the time we get to eat, it's all gone.
I gotta
so.
say, I did too much talking, but it was
That's
again
always the
eye-opening.
networking events are like that, right?
And then it was concluded by a very inspirational talk by Travis Roy.
It was.
I call him the young man, but at the time the young man who was paralyzed just as he began his BU hockey career, and now 20 years later has an inspirational story that isn't an in-your-face inspirational story. It's just a kind of a matter-of-fact accounting of how he recognized how life had changed and how he was going to deal with it. And just by saying it in somewhat matter-of-fact terms, I think made it more powerful.
Yeah, no, I
about
agree.
that?
It was the 6th time we've had this event, and we always have a wonderful guest speaker. But Travis Roy blew all of us away. We have had Teddy Bruschi speaking about the challenges he had in overcoming his stroke, and we've had Medal of Honor winners. But I don't think anyone touched me quite as much as Travis Roy did.
There was not a dry eye within line of sight from where I was sitting. It was very impressive.
So it's really many events in one. It's an opportunity for people to get together and network. It's an opportunity for us to recognize people in the community, whether they're Enterprise Bank customers or not, as Jay says. And then it's an opportunity to listen to someone like Travis Roy and just be inspired by it. So and it's all run by bank employees. We do not hire a party planning company or a marketing company, and you can just see the level of dedication that our marketing and sales folks put into that.
And there's a lot of Enterprise green when you come up to that building. It was a rainy day, and there was a lot of green umbrellas.
Yes.
Jay had one.
Yep, exactly.
So
everyone goes to work on that day, but it's a lot of fun.
And I guess we'd be remiss without mentioning some of the people from our community who were either finalists or winners. We had Mark Conrad, who was a finalist for Educator of the Year.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We had Linda Broder from Bishop Girton, who was Educator of the Year. And we had Amy LaBelle and her husband from LaBelle Winery as Small Business of the Year,
Right.
which was really just nice recognition. There were a lot of other recognition and a lot of people who I hadn't heard of, but it was great to see those as well.
Mm.
Yeah, Nashua was so well represented. The greater Nashua was, and we were very, very pleased. Debbie Novotny actually nominated some of those folks, and she was very, very pleased. Deb Gleason from Nature of Things, I think, was
Absolutely.
a finalist
There's
as
another
well.
one.
Yeah, and Debbie serves on our advisory council in Nashua, and they do such a wonderful job at Nature of Things. We were very pleased as well.
They really do, and Debbie, they were actually in the BNI group with me and Deb as well. So they're a terrific organization too. So some of the organizations that you get involved with for nonprofits, obviously I mentioned United Way, and there's a strong connection there. And I should also say publicly then, thank you. You guys are also sponsoring an event that we're holding in June. We're doing a food packaging fundraising event for summertime hunger. And summertime's a very tough time in the pantries. Not a lot of donations, a lot of need, maybe more need than takes place during the school year because you have all the little kiddos, home from school. So our goal was to package at least 10,000 meals to get distributed out into the community, and Enterprise Bank sponsored $1,500. So that's 6,000 of those meals are directly as a result of your sponsorship. So thank you for that. What are some of the other specific ways in which you get involved personally and also as a company in philanthropy?
Want me to start?
You start. And I'll
This
try
we
and-
won't. Locally, I am involved and have been for quite a while with Opportunity Networks, which is a regional supporter of people with disabilities, particularly for employment and life skills and so forth, that has been around for 30 or so years and does great work in the Amherst area.
They're in
Serves
Amherst and here in
greater
Nashua as well.
Yes. There's an office here in Nashua as well. I work locally. I live in the town of Amherst, so I was a selectman at one point in time. I know Peter very involved in his town government at one point in time. I think
Then we both wised up.
well,
you-
we did our turn.
Well, you were on the finance
budget
committee.
Yeah, I
committee,
was
yeah.
elected a couple of terms in the budget committee.
I
in
was
Salem.
did a couple terms in the finance committee in Brookline. That's.
It's
We'll
an
have-
important job that no one wants to.
Maybe we'll have that conversation at a different time.
Yes, exactly.
With different drinks, you know.
Yes, and I've maintained, even though it's not a town activity directly, the Emerson Land Trust is a
Oh, yeah.
nonprofit that does a lot of work both in conservation, and we're actually about to finish up a new playground in the center of town that
saw
has been
that- I saw
a
that in
major
the paper.
initiative.
Yeah.
And although I am only the treasurer, lots of other people worked hard to raise the money. I just put it in the bank. That's an organization that does a lot of
You
good
raised,
work.
I think, over $1 million, right?
No, about 400,000.
Oh, it was 400,
which is
yeah.
still a lot of money. But,
For a small town, for sure.
Yes, and
Definitely.
in that particular regard, it kind of ties in with nonprofits in general. That the breadth of support for that playground has been enormous. There have been over 500 donors, and for any type of fundraising of that scale in one town, that's a huge number of people who've written checks from $25 to $25,000.
That's great. So,
Nice.
so what at Enterprise Bank what's the business case to be made for giving back to the community for Enterprise Bank?
Well, that's a great question. The business case is that we are privileged enough to be welcomed into every community we go into. 11 years ago was our first foray into New Hampshire, and we went into Salem. And at this point, Salem, although it's the 13th branch that Enterprise opened, is now the second largest in terms of loan and deposit volume. And when we believe, and it goes back to George, but I think all of us really believe it to our core, when a community welcomes us in and when we have success financially in a community, it's incumbent upon us to give back to that community. Our second New Hampshire branch was Derry. Our folks there are incredibly involved in the Boys and Girls Club of Derry. Our third New Hampshire branch was Hudson, and we've got folks involved in Kiwanis and all the other organizations there. And our fourth one was Pelham, and that is a very close community. They have the Pelham Good Neighbor Fund that our folks have been very involved both in fundraising and activity. And then from there, it went into Nashua. And the folks, Jay talks about his involvement. You mentioned Debbie Novotny and Lori Piper, how involved they are in Nashua. John Phelan has been incredibly involved in the establishment of one of the business incubators that's starting up, the Nashua Hub.
Yeah.
Also serves on the board of directors of the Merrimack Chamber of Commerce. So all of us do it. Certainly it raises your visibility in the community, and there are business benefits to that. But the reason we do it is when we're welcomed into these communities and you're able to succeed financially, it's incumbent to give back to that community. And it sounds like a tagline, but it's from the heart. It's something that we live every day. So that's the business reason, I think, Mike.
Yeah. Well, it does sound like a tagline, but seeing the way you live it and have lived it for so many years, it's clear that it's more than a tagline, and it's obviously something that on the nonprofit side of the world we appreciate, and in the community we appreciate, and you are just great neighbors. I can think of no better way to wrap up our interview than on those notes. So thank you very much for coming in today. Believe it or not, we have hit the magic time of done. So I told you this isn't going to be that painful. But before we
Time flies
go,
when
that
you're-
time does
you
fly.
have a good
It's been a real
interviewer.
pleasure.
Well, before we finish here, you never leave an interview with Mike Affelberg without trinkets and toys.
Outstanding.
One is United Way Day of Carrying Water Bottles.
Oh, nice.
How exciting.
No, that is.
Thank you.
And you probably only have 200 Live United shirts in your closet, so we'll add two more, make that 202 for each of you.
Well, I keep that when we do the day. We do Day of
There you
Caring
go.
almost every year, so it's always fun to have these. So
That's
thank you.
great. That's great, gentlemen. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today and talking a little bit about the Enterprise Bank story and your own personal stories. And congratulations, and wishing you the best of future luck as we move forward.
Terrific.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.